The air in the command room of the outpost on Tadrak was thick with the sharp scent of synthetic coffee, the hum of a dozen machines, and the low murmur of conversation. Alien soldiers, a mix of reptilian, insectoid, and humanoid species, gathered around the holographic table, discussing strategies for their upcoming mission. The table flickered as it projected a map of the battlefield, a desolate wasteland of rock and dust, where the Varex had made their last stand. Despite the intensity of their work, the aliens couldn't help but laugh. Their laughter echoed through the room, a sound of amusement that was half mocking, half condescending. "You humans!" Zenik, a massive insectoid soldier, chortled, his multifaceted eyes glinting with mirth. "You've filled your history with such absurd myths. The one about a man who could lift mountains, how charming!" A chorus of laughter followed, their voices rising in mockery. They had grown accustomed to dismissing humanity as a species of primitive creatures with no place in the greater galactic order. To them, humans were nothing more than an amusing oddity, a footnote in the grand history of the cosmos. Monroe, standing off to the side, felt his jaw tighten. His mind was racing, not just with frustration, but with something deeper, something personal. He was no stranger to this kind of disrespect. He'd heard it too many times before, from those who saw his species as nothing more than a curiosity, a relic of a bygone era. As Zenik's laughter subsided, he turned to Monroe, his large clawed hand tapping on the table. "And what about your so-called heroes, Captain Monroe? The ones you Earthlings adore? Tell me about your Ironheart, this legendary warrior who supposedly changed the fate of your planet. I'm sure he was a mighty man, no doubt," Zenik sneered. "The great savior of humanity." The others turned to Monroe with amused smirks. Even the usually stoic Strahl, a cold and calculating reptilian officer, allowed a rare grin to curl the edges of his lips. Monroe's eyes flicked over to them, his mind sharp, his fingers twitching in frustration. For a moment, the room felt smaller, the laughter louder. But then, something inside him clicked. He was done being quiet, done taking their mockery. Without a word, Monroe stepped forward, his boots making a soft thud on the floor. The others watched, surprised at his sudden movement. He had always been the quiet, no-nonsense leader, never one to engage in the endless banter and jokes that the aliens thrived on. "Let me tell you about Ironheart," Monroe said, his voice low but firm. "You think he's just a myth? Just a story to entertain the children of Earth? Well, you're wrong. He's real, and his actions changed the course of history." A ripple of silence swept through the room. Zenik's laughter faltered, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. The other soldiers exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. Monroe could see the skepticism in their eyes, and he welcomed it. There was nothing more dangerous than underestimating the truth. "Ironheart," Monroe continued, "wasn't a giant, wasn't some invincible hero with superhuman strength. He was just a man, a soldier like me. But he had something more than raw power. He had the will to fight, the courage to stand against insurmountable odds, and the leadership to unite people who were divided." The aliens remained quiet, now listening, but still skeptical. Monroe wasn't just telling them a story. He was introducing them to a new concept, something they had never truly understood: the power of the human spirit. "It was the Battle of Earth," Monroe said, his voice gaining strength as he delved into the tale. "The Varex had invaded, ravaging our cities, crushing our defenses. But when Ironheart stepped forward, he didn't lead with weapons. He led with strategy. With unity. He turned the tide of the war by inspiring those around him." Zenik snorted, his antennae twitching with disdain. "So you're telling me this man, this Ironheart, fought an entire war with unity? How quaint." Monroe shot Zenik a sharp glance, his gaze unwavering. "It wasn't just about unity. It was about defiance. The Varex had underestimated humanity. They thought we were weak, too small, too primitive. But Ironheart proved them wrong." Monroe paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. He could feel the tension building, the aliens starting to shift in their seats, some of them even leaning in to listen more closely. He led an army of regular humans, no special powers, no advanced technology, just determination. He outsmarted the Varex at every turn. The battle was brutal, but in the end, it wasn't the strength of our weapons that won us the war. It was the strength of our hearts. Ironheart showed humanity that we could win, even against the most impossible odds. The room was still now. No laughter. No mocking. Just the weight of Monroe's words sinking in. "You're right," Monroe said, his voice quieter now. "Ironheart wasn't a myth. He was a symbol. A symbol of what humanity can accomplish when we stand together and refuse to back down." Zenek's mouth twitched as if he was about to say something, but Monroe's piercing gaze silenced him. The other aliens were quiet too, their faces unreadable. It was as if, for the first time, they were seeing humans in a new light, not as a primitive species clinging to outdated beliefs, but as something much more formidable. Monroe turned to face them all, his eyes sweeping the room. "If you think our myths are nothing but stories, then you haven't seen what humans are truly capable of. You think we're just a footnote in the galaxy? You're wrong. We're just getting started." The silence stretched on for a moment longer before Zenek finally spoke, his voice oddly respectful. "Perhaps we have underestimated you, human." Monroe nodded once, his expression unwavering. "You're not the first. But Ironheart won't be the last." And as the last of the laughter faded from the room, the first flickers of respect began to form in the eyes of the alien soldiers, respect for a race they had once written off as insignificant. Monroe had told them the truth. And from that moment on, they would never look at humanity, or its legends, the same way again. The battle had come too fast too soon. The sunless sky over Tadrak was cracked open by the roar of distant engines. From the command center, Captain Monroe and his team could already hear the rumble of explosions reverberating through the air. It had started as a routine mission, patrols, reconnaissance, the usual drudgery, but it was clear now that something far worse was coming their way. "We've got incoming!" shouted Strahl, the cold-eyed reptilian officer, his voice sharp with urgency. The screens in front of him flickered with enemy signals, Varex warships descending on the outpost from every angle. Monroe's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected this. They'd only just finished preparing their defenses. But the Varex were relentless, always seeking to strike when least expected. The laughable myths of humanity seemed like distant memories now, overshadowed by the immediate danger of the invasion. "All units to your posts!" Monroe barked, his voice a sharp command that cut through the tension in the room. His team immediately responded, moving swiftly to their battle stations. His mind raced, trying to piece together a strategy to hold the line. "Monroe, you're with me!" Zenek's voice came from behind. The insected soldier's expression had shifted from mocking to grim determination. He was no longer laughing. His tone was businesslike, and Monroe noted the change. "Understood," Monroe replied, his gaze hardening. There was no time to explain, no time to second-guess. He moved quickly, stepping into the field with the rest of the team. This wasn't about myths anymore, it was about survival. Outside, the landscape of Tadrak stretched out in bleak desolation, mountains of dust and broken stone, a barren place filled with the remnants of wars long past. But today, it would be the battleground for the next chapter in humanity's struggle. Monroe's pulse quickened as the first explosions tore into the outpost's outer defenses. A series of shrieks and the buzz of alien weapons followed. The Varex were upon them. "We'll hold them off as long as we can," Monroe said, scanning the horizon, his voice low but resolute. "This isn't just about stopping the Varex. We're showing the galaxy what humans can do." Zenek growled in agreement, his many limbs shifting to aim his plasma rifle. The alien soldier's hands were steady now, focused. Monroe couldn't help but notice the shift in him. Gone was the ridicule. In its place, a soldier ready to fight. The first wave of Varex soldiers stormed the perimeter, their hulking forms a blur of dark armor and snarling aggression. The alien forces had always been powerful, but the Varex were something else, ruthless, fierce, and deadly. Monroe's heart pounded, but he didn't hesitate. He called out orders, directing his team to strategic positions. Strahl took the high ground, firing a steady barrage of plasma at the advancing Varex. The humans had learned quickly that technology alone couldn't win a fight. It was strategy, ingenuity, and adaptability that would turn the tide. "Stay sharp!" Monroe shouted. The first blast of a Varex laser slammed into a nearby rock, sending shards of debris flying. He ducked behind cover and fired back, his rifle discharging with deadly precision. The Varex were powerful, but humanity had something they didn't: adaptability. In the thick of the firefight, Zennik moved fluidly, his alien instincts kicking in. Monroe observed him for a brief moment, impressed by the alien soldier's skill. But this was no time for distractions. He'd led humans in battle before, but this was different. This time, he wasn't just defending a planet, he was defending humanity's right to exist in the galaxy. The Varex seemed to multiply with every passing second. As Monroe peered through the scope of his rifle, he saw a Varex warlord charging at them, the massive alien warrior cutting a path through their defenses like a blade through butter. Monroe's eyes narrowed. "Get to the warlord! I'll cover you!" he ordered Zennik. Zennik hesitated, his antennae twitching in uncertainty. It wasn't fear, it was disbelief. Humans had never fought the Varex one-on-one like this. "I don't understand," Zennik said, his voice low. "How can you fight like this? You're not even using the same technology, no advanced weapons, no ships like ours. How do you survive?" Monroe's response came without hesitation. "We don't survive by technology alone. We survive by the will to keep fighting. By doing whatever it takes to win." Zennik's multifaceted eyes flickered, and for the first time, Monroe saw something other than contempt. It was understanding. With a sharp nod, Zennik charged forward, his weapon raised, and began to engage the warlord in close combat. Monroe was impressed. Zennik's actions were fast, brutal, and calculated. He had come to respect the human's unyielding spirit, and now he was seeing it firsthand. But Monroe's focus wasn't on Zennik. It was on the battlefield. He moved quickly, directing fire, laying down suppressive shots, and coordinating his team's efforts with military precision. Humans had always been underestimated in the galaxy, but today, they were proving their worth. As the battle raged on, Monroe's thoughts drifted back to the tale he told earlier, the story of Ironheart. A story of one man who had turned the tide of an entire war by inspiring others to fight, to unite, and to never surrender. It seemed so distant now, as if the story had happened in another lifetime. Yet, it felt as though the very spirit of Ironheart was guiding him now, in this moment, on this battlefield. The Varex were relentless, but they weren't prepared for the way humans fought. Monroe's team wasn't just defending, it was outsmarting and outmaneuvering the Varex at every turn. Strategy, not strength, was their weapon of choice. "Keep them off our perimeter!" Monroe shouted, firing his weapon into the advancing Varex. His mind was working at 1,000 miles an hour, analyzing every move, every angle. This was what he had trained for. This was why he had fought alongside Ironheart's legend. It wasn't about being the strongest. It was about being the smartest. Then, through the chaos, Monroe saw something that made his heart race. The Varex warlord had Zennik pinned to the ground. It was huge, towering over the insected soldier, its claws raised, ready to strike. Without thinking, Monroe sprinted toward the warlord, his rifle raised. "Zennik!" he shouted. The alien soldier's body was bloodied, but his eyes flashed with defiance. He wasn't done yet. In a blur of motion, Monroe tackled the warlord from the side, driving his shoulder into the creature's thick armor. The warlord staggered but recovered quickly, swinging a massive fist toward Monroe. "Now, Zennik!" Monroe shouted. Zennik's antennae twitched, and in that moment, the alien soldier's claws shot forward, impaling the Varex warlord. The beast let out a roar of pain, its grip faltering as Zennik kicked it away. Monroe breathed heavily, his pulse pounding in his ears. Zennik was panting, exhausted but victorious. The Varex warlord crumpled to the ground. Monroe stepped back, giving Zennik a nod of approval. You did it, he said. Zenith looked at him, his expression unreadable. Then, in a voice that was almost reverent, he said, Perhaps there's truth in your myth after all, Captain. The words hung in the air, a new understanding between them. The fight was far from over, but one thing was clear: humanity had earned its place on this battlefield. And the galaxy would never look at them the same way again. The air was thick with dust and smoke, the remnants of an earlier, brutal conflict. The outpost on Tadrak had become a war zone, a place where the line between survival and death had blurred into nothingness. The sound of distant explosions rumbled through the hills, the cries of battle still echoing from every corner. Monroe stood amidst the wreckage, his mind focused, his body numb from exhaustion. But there was no time to rest. The Varex were regrouping, preparing for their next push. Captain Monroe! A voice called from behind him. It was Strahl, the reptilian officer, his voice cool but edged with urgency. We've got movement. The Varex are rallying for a final assault. This isn't just another skirmish. They're bringing everything they've got. Monroe turned, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. The Varex were cunning. He had known from the start that they wouldn't relent easily. But this felt different. The air was heavy with the sense that the battle for Tadrak would determine the future for more than just the outpost. We need to take control of the high ground, Monroe said, his voice calm and steady. If we can cut off their reinforcements, we might have a chance to push them back for good. Zenith appeared at Monroe's side, his insected form now battle-worn, his face devoid of the smugness it once held. The insected soldier had come to respect Monroe, not just as a leader, but as a symbol of humanity's potential. What had started as mockery had transformed into a bond forged in the fires of battle. I'll lead the charge from the east flank, Zenith said, his voice gruff but resolute. We'll give them everything we've got. Monroe nodded, grateful for the alien soldiers' newfound alliance. The war on Tadrak wasn't just about the survival of a single species anymore. It was about proving to the galaxy that humanity was more than just a footnote. They were warriors, each of them capable of doing the impossible. We'll hit them from all sides, Monroe replied, his eyes scanning the tactical map on the holographic display. Strahl, you and your team take the western pass. I'll lead the main assault on the center. Keep communications open. We need to act fast. As the plan took shape, the tension in the air thickened. The Varex were not going to go down without a fight. The heavy rumble of their war machines echoed closer, sending vibrations through the ground beneath them. Monroe's team moved swiftly, each member falling into place, ready to face whatever came next. In the midst of the preparations, Monroe found himself alone for a brief moment, standing on the edge of the outpost. He stared out at the horizon, the vast expanse of Tadrak stretching out before him, silent but foreboding. This was it, the final stand. A hand clapped him on the shoulder, breaking his focus. He turned to find Zenith standing beside him, his eyes serious but not without a hint of respect. You never told me, Zenith began, his voice softer than before. Where did this Ironheart story come from? You speak of him as if he's more than just a legend. What made him so different? Monroe paused, his mind flashing back to the days when he first heard the tale of John Ironheart Carter. It had been a story passed down from generation to generation, a story of one man's defiance against impossible odds. But it wasn't just the story that stuck with him. It was the way the legend had inspired a whole generation of humans to fight back. Ironheart wasn't special, Monroe said, his voice thoughtful. He was just a man. A soldier. But when the world was on the brink of collapse, he showed us what it means to fight for something greater than ourselves. It wasn't just about winning battles. It was about doing whatever it took to survive. Zenith seemed to consider this, his mandibles clicking softly. And that's what you're doing now, isn't it? Doing whatever it takes. Monroe nodded, his gaze hardening. Exactly. No one thought we could win this. No one thought humanity had the strength to stand up to the Varex, or any of the other galactic powers. But we've got something they don't: resolve. The will to keep fighting, no matter what. The words hung in the air for a moment, unspoken understanding passing between them. Zenek didn't need further explanation. The alien soldier had seen it himself now, the strength of the human spirit, a force that even the most ruthless warriors couldn't ignore. The battle began without warning. Explosions shook the ground as the Varex advanced in full force, their war machines tearing through the landscape. The first wave crashed into the western defenses, their weapons cutting through metal and stone with ease. Monroe's team responded quickly, laying down a barrage of gunfire that sent the Varex scrambling for cover. Monroe led the charge, his rifle aimed with precision as he fired at incoming enemy troops. Every shot counted. Every decision could mean the difference between life and death. He moved with purpose, his mind razor-sharp, guided by the same instincts that had been honed in countless battles before. But today was different. Today, he was not just fighting for survival, he was fighting for his people's future. The Varex fought with ferocity, but they weren't prepared for the way humans fought. Monroe's team moved in unison, each member working together like a well-oiled machine. The Varex had underestimated them once before. Now they would pay for it. As the battle raged on, Zenek and Strahle's forces pushed forward, flanking the Varex from both sides. The Varex warlord, the same one Monroe had seen fall earlier, was back, more enraged than ever. This time, he wasn't alone. A new, massive war machine had arrived, its metal claws gleaming in the light as it barreled toward the center of their defenses. Monroe's heart raced. This was the final push. "We need to take that machine down now!" Monroe shouted, pointing toward the massive war machine. "Strahl, can you take it from the flank?" The reptilian officer's response was immediate. "Already on it, Captain!" Monroe turned back to the Varex lines, his rifle raised. He took a deep breath, focusing on the task ahead. This was his moment, his chance to prove that humanity was more than just a myth. This was where the legend of Ironheart would live on, not in the pages of ancient books, but in the reality of this battlefield. As the war machine charged toward them, Monroe moved forward, leading the assault with unrelenting determination. The clash was brutal. Explosions filled the air, debris flying in every direction. Monroe ducked and weaved, staying just a step ahead of the Varex's deadly fire. Every shot he fired found its mark, every order he gave was followed without question. Then, in the midst of the chaos, the war machine staggered, smoke pouring from its joints. Strahle's fire had found its mark, and the massive beast was slowing down. Monroe's team pressed the advantage, closing in for the kill. With one final push, the Varex warlord fell. The machine crumpled beneath the weight of their firepower, its hulking form collapsing into the dust. As the dust settled and the sounds of battle began to fade, Monroe stood amidst the wreckage, panting but unbowed. His team was battered, bloodied, but victorious. The Varex had retreated. Zenek walked up to Monroe, his insectoid eyes reflecting the respect he now felt. "You did it," Zenek said, his voice quiet. "We did it."